Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, July the 11th, 2024. Today, Venus moves into a Leo, and that's something I want to talk about. What does it mean to have Venus and Leo in your chart? And is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? And I'm going to have a few examples of people who have Venus in Leo in their horoscopes. And you can see some of these people in the thumbnail. For example, we've got Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan. We've got Marine Le Pen, the right-wing French politician and wannabe French president. She doesn't get a chance, I don't think, until 2027. That's when the next presidential election is. We've got former American President George Bush. We've got Slovak Prime Minister, who recently survived an assassination attempt, Robert Fico, and Monica Lewinsky. Remember her? She was a big name in the 1990s, wasn't she, associated with Bill Clinton? There are a couple of other people I want to talk about. But before I talk about the moon in Leo, before I talk about Venus in Leo, I want to consider what's going on today. By the way, I should ask, if you do enjoy this video, I'd be really grateful if you were to like it. And if you're not subscribed, I really would appreciate it if you were to subscribe. I think I'm on 4,800 and something subscribers. I really want to get to that 5,000. When I get to the 5,000, I have to start thinking about the next milestone. What is it, 7,500 or 10,000 or whatever? It seems a long way away. But yeah, if you're not subscribed and if you were to subscribe, I would be really grateful. Okay, so let's look at what's going on today. Here we are. Okay, so actually that is the horoscope of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who I may or may not be talking about later because he has got Venus in Leo. But what I want to talk about really is today, which is Thursday, July the 11th, 2024. So the moon is in late Virgo. So set for noon, so New York time. So really for most of us, it's pretty much going to be a moon in Virgo day. I mean, the moon does eventually go into Libra. I mean, when does it go into Libra? Moon goes into Libra at sort of 3 a.m. in London. So, okay, the moon will actually go into Libra this evening if you're in the Americas. But yeah, for most of us, moon is opposition. So moon is opposition Saturn in Virgo. So with the moon in Virgo, it's another day when I think that details are going to be important, when we're going to want to be in touch with the material world. And, we're going to perhaps have a little bit of perfectionism creeping in. That's moon opposition Saturn. And there is a bit of a contrast with moon opposition Saturn. So moon in Virgo is perhaps us trying to make sure everything is in order. And then Saturn in Pisces, having to deal with the reality of the world out there. And the world out there is not entirely stable. Things are not in nice, neat compartments. It's difficult to get clear detail. And we perhaps have to deal with ambiguity. And perhaps that's what the moon opposition Saturn is all about. We want things to be straightforward, but they're not straightforward. And so we have to deal with the pressure and the angst when things are not clear. So that's one thing going on today. And Saturn is actually quite strongly placed over the course of the day because there is a Sun-Saturn trine. So Sun in Cancer makes a trine to Saturn in Pisces. So a Sun-Saturn trine is probably quite a stabilizing influence. I've got Sun trine Saturn. I've got Sun in Gemini trine Saturn in Aquarius. But Sun trine Saturn in water signs, it's perhaps about accepting that things are emotional, that people do have feelings, perhaps quite powerful feelings, but being able to contain them. And it is about containment. It's not, I don't think, about repression. So if it was Sun square Saturn or Sun opposition Saturn, we might think about repression. But Sun trine Saturn, particularly in the water signs, it could be actually about harnessing the emotional environment, utilizing people's feelings, utilizing our feelings. And overall, I would have said that aspect was fairly fortunate. Now, the moon is making a number of different aspects. It's making that opposition to Saturn. It's also making a trine to the Sun. Now, that trine to the Sun is probably going to be more if you're in... Well, in fact, the moon makes an opposition to the Saturn and an opposition and a sextile to the Sun at pretty much the same time. So if moon in Virgo, you want exact times. I don't think there's any real point in giving exact times. The thing is that moon opposition Saturn, moon sextile Sun, they are happening at the beginning of the day, and you are going to probably feel them more if you're in Australia or New Zealand than if you're in the Americas. But in general, those two aspects are about stabilizing things, and so that is something that can take place at the beginning of the day, but I think throughout the day, because we just have those sign to sign aspects: moon in Virgo opposition Saturn in Pisces, with Sun in Cancer making a trine to Saturn in Pisces, and the moon sextile the Sun. So I think that's quite a fortunate configuration if we are looking for stability. And the moon, having made a sextile to the Sun, makes a trine to Mars. So and it makes a trine to Uranus. So that Mars-Uranus conjunction is really starting to be activated. Now, you could say moon in Virgo trine Mars, trine Uranus is fortunate because it gets things going, gets things moving. We can be dynamic. We can stir things up. That's good. But is a trine always a good aspect? And it just may be that moon trine Mars, trine Saturn just makes something a little too easy, particularly as Uranus is on Algol, that rather difficult fixed star, often connected with unpleasantness and disaster. So moon trine Mars, moon trine Uranus could just make things too easy. It may be easy for bad things to happen. If we take a risk, things quickly go wrong. So there is a negative to that. On the other hand, perhaps we can shake things up. Perhaps we can try to use the Mars-Uranus energy to make an impression with those trines. Now, the moon lunar aspects are not the only thing going on. We've already talked about Sun trine Saturn. We also have Venus trine Neptune. So Venus is on the absolute brink of leaving Cancer. You can see that at noon New York time, Venus is at what, 29? Is that 29, 50 something Cancer? It's absolutely on the brink. And as Venus leaves Cancer, it makes a trine to Neptune. And that trine to Neptune in water signs is probably quite nice. It makes us pretty receptive to whatever's happening out there. Can make us spiritual. We can understand things and feel things which might normally pass us by. Though with Venus trine Neptune, it's perhaps very easy to get overwhelmed. I remember ages and ages ago, in the 80s, I went to some psychic festival. I don't really go to psychic festivals, but I went to this psychic festival. I don't know, I think it was in South London, and I was in my early 20s, and some psychic pointed out that I had a hole in my aura, whatever that means. And I kind of understand it. I'm not being dismissive, but I suppose if you've got a hole in your aura, that might indicate that your psychic boundaries are somehow compromised. And so Venus trine Neptune might be about the compromising of one's psychic boundaries. It's just too easy to pick up emotional and spiritual and psychic stuff from the world around you, and you could just get overwhelmed. And so if you are particularly psychic, or you have psychic abilities, you could get overwhelmed. I suppose, psychotherapists can get overwhelmed, can't they? If they see too many clients too quickly, they can just be overwhelmed by their clients' material. So if you're a psychic or a psychotherapist, or in fact, if you have to deal with anyone on a one-to-one level for long periods of time, particularly if you have to deal with lots of different people on a one-to-one level with that Venus trine Neptune, yeah, you might be very perceptive, but at a certain point, it just might just be too much of a good thing. So Venus, having made that trine to Neptune, moves into Leo. And of course, that is a big change. That's the topic of this video. So Venus actually moves into Leo. Let me just tell you when it moves into Leo. It moves into Leo at 19 minutes past 5 in London. So it moves into Leo, I suppose, early tomorrow morning if you're in Australia or New Zealand. Late morning if you're in California. No, actually not late morning. It would be sort of 9 o'clock. 9:19 p.m. if you're in California, but just after noon if you're in New York or the Eastern Standard Time. So that is a very big change, Venus moving from Cancer into Leo, and it does add to the Leo emphasis. The train is leaving Cancer now. It's now the spotlight is on Leo, and Venus in Leo can be proud. I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? Venus can be about what we look like, perhaps being quite self-conscious about what we look like, and perhaps wanting to look our best. So that's one aspect of Venus in Leo. And even if we ourselves are not concerned about our appearances, we need to consider the possibility that other people are. And with Venus in Leo, there could be a certain vulnerability to flattery. It's probably a good time to tell people how wonderful they look, because they're going to really appreciate that. And of course, Venus does stay in Leo for some time. I think Venus moves into Virgo. When does Venus? I make it that of the 4th and the 5th of August. So between now and the 4th and 5th of August, or early August, Yeah, flattery can perhaps get you anywhere. But if you're the one needing flattery and attention, well, is it really necessary? Okay, it makes you feel good. And if you get flattery, that's good. But if you don't get flattery, then don't take it to heart. But aside from what Venus means, it just means that there's more Leo in the sky. And that means more fire in the sky. So with Mercury and Venus in Leo, there's more spark, there's more action. There's a sense that things are coming together. We can be more intuitive. We perhaps don't have to spend ages working out what we feel about a matter. We can just intuitively know what it's all about without having to think or feel about it. So maybe that's not such a bad thing, Venus moving from Cancer into Leo, especially if you're a fire sign. If you're an Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, it possibly makes you more powerful and more confident and perhaps even a little more centered. Turning to the heliocentric picture, there are a couple of things going on heliocentrically which I should point out. So from a heliocentric point of view, you can see that Mercury is now in Scorpio. I don't really take the signs too seriously in heliocentric astrology. It's more about the aspect, though I do understand that some astrologers using heliocentric astrology do take signs seriously, and I think they can associate heliocentric sign changes with, for example, changes in the markets, because heliocentric astrology is something used in stock market astrology quite a lot. At least that was my understanding. Maybe not anymore. I don't know. Maybe I'll have a video at some stage about the economy. I've been thinking about the economy quite a lot, and astrology and the economy, and I think something needs to be said about it. But anyway, I don't want to get distracted. So Mercury moves into Scorpio, into heliocentric Scorpio, and it makes a square to Pluto. So we've got Mercury-Pluto square today. So with Mercury-Pluto square, it emphasizes mental control, wanting to be in control, and perhaps being aware of the power of words. Words can have an influence on people. Words are perhaps a way of controlling the agenda. And so some people are going to be using words to manipulate. Where do you fit in that? Are you going to be the one who wants to use words to control your environment? Or are you going to be at the receiving end of other people's words? So if you are at the receiving end of someone's attempt to influence you, perhaps trying to influence you to buy something or to sign up to something, do consider the dynamic of what is going on, because there is a fair amount of mental manipulation going on. And another aspect happening heliocentrically is Venus is a quincunx Saturn. So Venus, heliocentric Venus is in Leo, and heliocentric Saturn's in Pisces. There's our Venus Saturn quincunx. With that quincunx, there may be a sense in which something is held back. If we take Venus as being the planet of relationships, quincunx Saturn, there's just something that cannot be articulated, at least on an emotional sense. And maybe that ties in with the fact that we have got geocentrically a Sun trine Saturn. So that geocentric Sun trine Saturn is about control. And I think the Venus quincunx Saturn is about repression, holding something in, perhaps not being able to relate as much as we would like to. And I suppose that's also a reminder that geocentrically Venus is moving from Cancer to Leo. Leo can be quite a harsh sign. Remember that. It's very warm, hot, and Venus is perhaps a bit overwhelmed when it moves into Leo. And we're seeing a similar picture here heliocentrically with that Venus semisextant, Venus quincunx Saturn. So don't expect everyone to be emotionally flowing. Today there are things that could be held back. Okay, that's the heliocentric picture. And now it's time to look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, July the 11th, 2024. Aries. You don't have to spend all your time with other people today. It really isn't necessary. In fact, there is some danger that you spend time with the wrong people if you're not thinking. There are people out there who really are up to no good, they can't be trusted, and they could just make things difficult for you. And so if you are mixing with other people, then just be careful and ask yourself what you're trying to achieve and what could go wrong. I mean, I suppose it depends what you're doing, or where you're going, what parts of town you're deciding to visit. But there just seems to be a danger here, Aries, that the company that you choose for yourself today may actually be inappropriate and might in some way drag you down. So if in doubt, it's probably best to stay out of people's way. At the same time, the moon is making a trine to Mars, and that's this trine between the moon and Mars is perhaps saying or telling you what you should actually be focusing on. This trine is fairly down to earth. I think it tends to be focusing on details, on the things that matter. So Aries, ask yourself, what does matter at the moment? Mars is still moving through Taurus, and perhaps with this moon trine Mars, you are looking to just sort things out. You're going to be in a better position to deal with the world and its challenges if your particular part of the world is all in order, and that's certainly something you can do. Though it's possible that some Arians might actually be thinking about their bodies and how they could be, making themselves fitter and perhaps leaner and stronger. This might be a focus you have, and moon trine Mars might encourage you to engage in some kind of regimen, might be a fitness regimen, dietary regimen. Maybe that's the right thing to do. Of course, you shouldn't undertake these kinds of things without medical advice, so make sure you're doing it right. But I think that's how some Arians are going to be thinking. They're going to be thinking that they could be fitter and healthier. So the moon, having made the trine to Mars, it goes on to make a trine to Uranus. And there are a number of ways of looking at that. Mars, your ruler, is getting close to Uranus. And Uranus it could make you accident prone. So, if you feel you need to take some exercise today or need to be out and about, I mean, you wouldn't want to do it here. It's really hot at the moment in Washington State. It's getting into the 90s all the time. It's a real problem, and I can't take the dog for a walk except at the middle of it in the night. So it's a pain. Yeah, you've got to watch out with dogs. I mean, if you're an Aries dog walker, you can't just go for a walk with your dog whenever you feel like it if it's hot. Apparently, they say the pavement, the road surface can get super hot, and the dog can burn its feet. You've got to be careful about that. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent there. So don't push it, Aries. Even if you really want to take exercise, if you want to be fitter, if you just do it, if you do it in an impulsive way, with that moon trine Mars, moon trine Uranus, maybe there might be a negative result. I don't know, spraining a muscle, falling over, whatever. But there might be another way of looking at this moon trine Mars, moon trine Uranus. We tend to, I've looked at this Mars-Uranus conjunction quite a lot over the last couple of months, and I've generally tended to be fairly negative because it's on Algol. But there might be another way of looking at it. This Mars conjunct Uranus might be a way for you, Aries, to shake things up, to force people to sit up and listen. Maybe not today, but over the next few weeks. And perhaps, Aries, you are in the process now of making quite dramatic changes. Changes perhaps to your routine, to the way you organize your life, which in the long term are going to put you in quite a powerful position vis-a-vis other people. And perhaps you're preparing some kind of surprise, and that would fit. And the surprise could have many dimensions, but could be a financial surprise, because this Mars-Uranus conjunction is going to take place in Taurus, which in the Aries chart does have a special connection with money. So perhaps that's what today is all about, that moon making trine to Mars, trine to Uranus, and how you manage it. I think it could be quite important. And that trine, this trine may not just be about today. If you're in Australia, New Zealand, it may also be about tomorrow. So it's a powerful weapon, that trine. So use it well. Taurus. Moon continues to move through Virgo. And I think that Virgo is a great place for the moon to be, at least if you're a Taurus. I think it does highlight everything that you are capable of. You are able to make things happen, and you are able to really assert your individuality. It's very clear at the moment what you can do, and you can do things in a way that is very special to you. You certainly don't want to follow the crowd, and you have to really tune into your individuality. Okay, I don't say you have to tune into your individuality, but I think it would be a good thing to do. With the moon in Virgo, in an earth sign, a sign that is very, very favorably disposed towards your sign, Taurus, the moon makes a trine to Mars, trine to Uranus, and that's a time when you can have a really quite a big impact, and that impact starts with yourself. You do something, you realize it's special, and you realize that it's very individual, and you also realize that it's powerful, and at the same time, you're aware how you can really start to stir things up. But it's always important to be true to yourself. This is, as I've just said, it's not a time to be following the crowd, not a time to be doing things another person's way. It's got to be your way. It really must be. So yeah, Taurus, you've got to do it your way. So that's one thing going on. But you could argue that the main thing going on today is Venus changing sign. Venus is your ruler, so Venus has a special connection with Taurus, and if we want to understand what's going on with Taurus, we need to track what Venus is doing. And so Venus is moving out of Cancer into Leo, and that does represent a big change. And it's about where you want to put your energy. It's about where you are best able to express yourself. And it could be said that with Venus moving into Leo, you are perhaps thinking more about home and family, because from a Taurus viewpoint, Leo is at the bottom of the chart. And so, when Venus moves into Leo, this is a time when you need to think about your roots. Where have you come from? And linking with your roots, making sure that you are, if possible, in connection with your family, or at least with your own home and the places where you belong. So that, I think, is terribly important. And I suppose if you're focusing on your home, that might be about you asking yourself, how could your home be better, and what is wrong with your home? Perhaps you look at where you live and you think this isn't good enough, or you might feel that it needs to be redecorated. Venus in Leo. Sure, you might want to do that if you feel it's the right thing to do. It's not about appearances. It should not be about appearances. There is that temptation there with Venus moving into Leo to be concerned about what things look like, and suddenly feeling that it's important to get praise. It's not about praise. I understand why you might think it's about praise, and why you might put a lot of store on how much admiration you're getting, but it shouldn't be like that. So if, for example, homes and real estate is important to you for whatever reason, maybe that's the industry you're in, or maybe you're renting places out, or you happen to be a renter, it still matters with, and it's going to matter not just a bit, it's going to matter a lot, I think, with Venus moving into Leo. And I suppose in a really positive sense, it's perhaps a time when you can actually make things look good. You can make your home look good, Venus in Leo. But it's most cases, provided it's done for yourself. It's not something you should be doing for other people, unless, of course, you're trying to sell your house, or you're trying to flip a house and you're trying to make it look as good as possible so that you can sell it for as high as possible the price. Okay, well, in that case, then fair enough. I suppose Venus in Leo is going to allow you to tune into what looks good and perhaps get the highest possible price. But, just remember, I'm not giving financial advice here. That's just a suggestion based on the fact that Venus is moving into Leo. Gemini. You possibly feel that other people are not really delivering. You have some expectations about other people, your friends, people you meet, colleagues, acquaintances, whatever. You expect a certain amount from them, And today you might be disappointed. And I suppose it's not that really that they're doing anything wrong. It just may have be the case that your expectations were too big to start with, and that your expectations need to be reduced. And you also need to consider, where should your energy be going? I would have said, Gemini, that your energy should perhaps not be going into your social life, thinking that, you should be the center of attention. No, it's not really a time, Gemini, to be the center of attention. It just won't work, and you won't feel comfortable. And in fact, Gemini, you're probably best just staying in one place, not feeling any obligation to go anywhere. Remember, I'm a Gemini, so I'm talking about myself as well as you. So you don't feel that obligation to move around. And if you're comfortable where you are, then stick with it. Yet, it can't be denied that the moon is making a trine to Mars and a trine to Uranus. So there are things going on in your head and your imagination which are probably quite powerful. You're thinking about what is possible, and you might actually be quite secretive about it. And that secretiveness is useful. There is a time to be out there in the world, making things happen, revealing your hand. But there are other times when you need to hang back and perhaps do some planning. Focus your energy on what you need to do. And you probably don't need anyone's help or assistance, so you can keep quiet about your plans. And I think when we look at the heliocentric picture, we get support, because from a heliocentric perspective, Mercury is square Pluto. So Mercury square Pluto, remember I'm talking about a heliocentric aspect, not a geocentric aspect. From a geocentric point of view, Mercury is not square Pluto. It's not aspecting Pluto, but from a heliocentric point of view, it is. And with that Mercury square Pluto, I think that you do have a sense of your own power. That's true, because it's Pluto. But at the same time, you probably feel that it's not really a time to say much. It's best to keep things secret, to focus on your own private world, and maybe steer clear of other people, because their influence simply might not be helpful, and you might be aware of some kind of power equation. So in any interaction, if you have to interact with anyone, there's always a winner or loser. I'm not saying it is a winner or loser, but it's going to feel like it. Someone gives someone something away. Someone else takes advantage of a situation. Two people meet. At the end of that meeting, one of them wins, one of them gains, and the other person loses. And I think that is going to be how you see the world. Now, I know I've been a little bit negative there, but you may be able to benefit from a trine between the Sun and Saturn. Now, Saturn is in Pisces, and Pisces, the sign Pisces, is important for Geminis. It's a high-profile sign. It can often relate to where you're going, your status, your job, your ambitions. And with Sun trine Saturn, you can actually do things to further your ambitions. And this might relate to what you're trying to do in your own private world, the stuff you don't want to talk about. You can quite easily start to create a situation where you can not just get closer to some of your achievements, but you can also start to find ways of benefiting in a financial sense, I think. Sun trine Saturn. So Sun trine Saturn, Gemini, does actually give you a good opportunity to sort something out in a financial sense. It may not be very interesting, it may not be the thing you want to do, but if you can focus a bit of your energy on money and work and making sure you're well positioned for the future, then I think that would be energy well spent. Cancer. You are actually in a position where you have quite a lot of energy. You have quite a lot of zest for life. And I think that Cancer, you're going to be able to express yourself pretty well. I think that you will know what details matter. And maybe it's all about details. The moon is ruler of Cancer. It's in Virgo. Virgo is a very details-orientated sign, and you're going to know what to focus on. I don't think that you're going to be overwhelmed by detail. Instead, you're just going to be able to concentrate on those details which are important to you. And that moon in Virgo is making a trine to Mars, and it's making a trine to Uranus. And so those two trines are going to just give you an enormous amount of energy, I think, but not a crazy amount of energy, not like you're going to be doing crazy stuff, because it is in earth signs. You know, moon is in Virgo, the Mars-Uranus conjunction is in Virgo. So you will be quite practical about it. And so you can take this energy and put it into something important and perhaps engage other people. You don't have to do everything on your own, and I think that you can be quite influential. So if you need help, if you need to be supported, then ask for that support, because I think that support will be forthcoming. Now, if you are in Australia, New Zealand, then the day might have a slightly different emphasis, because the moon is making an opposition to Saturn. I think if you're in the Americas, probably that moon opposition Saturn isn't going to particularly affect you. But if you're in Australia, New Zealand, yeah, that moon opposition Saturn could hit you a bit. And I think that you're going to be perhaps aware of the differences between yourself and others. That might be how the moon opposition Saturn works. Just feeling that you and someone else don't entirely see eye to eye, but at the same time, the moon does make a sextile to the sun. So perhaps you have an opportunity to bring people together in spite of their considerable disagreements. So do consider that, especially if you're in Australia, New Zealand, and East Asia. But I don't want to make too big a deal about it. You know, moon does move quickly. I wouldn't worry too much about the fact that it's making an opposition to Saturn. And in general, Cancer, you know, wherever you are, you have a lot of energy at your disposal, and you won't mince your words. If something needs to be said, you'll say it. And I think that in most cases, people will listen. Leo. Probably the main aspect today is a trine between the Sun and Saturn. So this is a trine. A trine tends to be a fortunate aspect. It makes things work easily. There's no resistance, or not much resistance. And so with Sun trine Saturn, Leo, we get a sense of stability. Sun is your ruler. It is trine Saturn. Saturn is able to stabilize things, and it's actually quite an emotional aspect, this Sun trine Saturn. Perhaps, Leo, in the recent past you've had strong feelings, strong, powerful feelings, which at times might have been overwhelming, and you might have wondered, what is the point in having these feelings? What are they there for? What does your unconscious want? What are you being told? In what direction are you being taken? But with the Sun trine Saturn, it allows you to stabilize the situation. Things can be brought under control, and that it can be done in a way in which there is no repression. It's not about feelings being swept under the carpet. It's about accepting the strength of your feelings, but perhaps recognizing that these feelings are not damaging. They're not going to overwhelm you. You are going to be able to deal with it, and that your emotions can be a strength rather than a weakness. Now, this Sun trine Saturn could be about relationships, because the Sun rules Leo. Leo is your sign. Saturn rules Aquarius. Of course, Aquarius is your opposite sign. So when you have Sun trine Saturn, that might be about a relationship being stabilized. There might have been recent problems, recent disagreements, but now things can be put on a stable footing. So if you and someone else have had recent arguments, or you haven't really understood each other, then the Sun trine Saturn allows you to perhaps confront these misunderstandings, but not in a way that is particularly dynamic, and just find a way of relating and finding perhaps common ground without having to say much, because Sun is in Cancer, Saturn is in Pisces. Cancer and Pisces are both mute signs. Sun in Cancer, crabs don't talk, crabs don't make a noise. Saturn in Pisces, fish are supposed to be quite silent. So it is in mute signs, this Sun trine Saturn. So there's nothing really much that has to be said. It's just perhaps about mutual emotional understanding, and that can really help stabilize relationships. And relationships are also important because Venus is moving into Leo. Today it happens. And it's the beginning of a time when other planets are going to move into your sign. The Sun in particular. You've already got Mercury in your sign. You're about to get Venus moving into Leo, and in less than a fortnight, the Sun will be moving into Leo. In about 10 days' time, the Sun will be moving into Leo. So, as far as the precise time when Venus moves into Leo, this is it's at 5:19 p.m. if you're in London. So that's late morning. If you're in New York, sort of mid-morning if you're sort of up 9 o'clock or something, 9:19 if you're on the West Coast. So it is happening. Okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, Venus won't move into your sign until tomorrow, but still it's happening. And so with Venus moving into Leo, it does put the emphasis on your social skills, how you relate. And I think you're going to be able to relate very well, especially if Sun is also trine Saturn. But as Venus moves through Leo, you're going to be someone who, I suppose, is charismatic. Appearances could be important, though. And you have to ask yourself, how much attention do you need or want? You can't expect to have attention, but you might want attention. And you might want praise. And that might be one small problem with Venus moving in through Leo. You might be too keen on getting praise. You shouldn't worry if you don't get praise. Venus in Leo is all about being, perhaps at the highest level, is about being self-sufficient and loving yourself and not feeling you have to do anything for anyone else. It's all about you. But not in an egotistical sense. It's just about you being self-contained. Virgo. Virgo, you still can feel the impact of the moon moving through your sign. It is moving through your sign for most of the day. Okay, if you're in the Americas, then very late in the day, the moon moves into Libra. But I think today you can still regard it as a moon in Leo, a moon in Virgo day. So with the moon in Virgo, I think that you're feeling reasonably comfortable, and you get a sense of what you can do. And actually, I think that there's a lot that Virgos can do. Now, Virgo can be quite a modest sign, doesn't like to sing its own praises too much, and in the first instance you might take the view that there isn't much you can do, but you just have to do what's required of you and just hope for the best and make sure all the details are sorted out. But it goes beyond that, because the moon, while it's in Virgo, does make a trine to Mars, and it makes a trine to Uranus. And so the moon making those trines to Mars and Uranus gives you power. It can make you come over actually in quite a strong way, and people will take notice. And actually you have a chance, Virgo, to deliver surprises. Now, I understand that many Virgos don't like surprises, and you don't feel that surprises are a good thing. But today you have an opportunity to be the one delivering surprises. So perhaps, Virgo, there are people who are complacent. They're just doing things in the same old way, and you're starting to find it irritating, and you can perhaps do something to change things. Perhaps say something unexpected, or do something that is ever so slightly out of character, and you do it, and you get an immediate response. And with this Mars-Uranus, it's important that you don't restrict yourself to any particular way of thinking or acting. And if it so happens that you are the receiving end, on the receiving end of a surprise, it may be about you being presented with a situation which is simply outside your normal experience. And if you're presented with a situation outside your normal experience, then, Virgo, I think that you should perhaps see it as an opportunity. You could always know more. You could always have more experiences. You could always see the world in a different way. And you've been given a chance here, even though this sort of new information, new experiences may be presented in quite a dramatic way. I do think that it's something that you can benefit from. Now, as far as other people are concerned, other people could be a bit of an issue today. Okay, especially if you're in Australia and New Zealand, because the moon is making an opposition to Saturn. Okay, if you're in the Americas, that moon opposition to Saturn will be something from the past, but I think it's still there because moon is in Virgo, Saturn's in Pisces, so regardless of the exact angle between moon and Saturn, they still have this opposition relationship, and it may just be that there are certain people who are just not being helpful. They're not giving you the air you need in which to breathe, and they seem to be holding you back. And at the same time, I think you're going to be acutely aware of the difference between people. Some people are there to encourage you, to help you, to help you make the most of what you've got. Other people are simply a drain on your resources. And both types of people are around today, and I think, Virgo, you need to make the distinction, decide which people you want to spend your time with. You spend your time with the right people, I think it can be a great day. Spend your time with the wrong people, and it could just be a really tedious drag. It could be a real problem, and you may just feel that you've missed a lot of opportunities. But don't worry, Virgo. You're sensitive, you're intuitive. You know which people can be trusted and which people are good for you. Libra. Well, probably the big news today is that Venus is changing sign. I mean, I did warn you that Venus was about to change sign, and really now it's happening. I think London time it happens at 5:19 p.m. So, okay, in Australia, New Zealand, it will happen tomorrow. If you're in the Americas, it will happen in the morning. But wherever you are, Venus is moving, changing sign from Cancer into Leo. So, with Venus moving into Leo, Libra, it could make you perhaps a little more proud. We can connect Leo with being proud, perhaps having maybe a high opinion of yourself. There's nothing wrong with having a high opinion of yourself, provided you don't get obsessed about it. So you don't want to be arrogant. And you always want to be aware that, things could be better, you could be better, improvements can always be made. And at the same time, Libra, it's just very important to recognize that you are what you are. I know Librans can put a lot of emphasis on their interactions with other people, with the world out there, feeling that things have to be right and not wanting criticism. But at some stage, you have to take a stand. And maybe with Venus moving into Leo, that's part of what it is. It's taking a stand. It's deciding who you are, what you want, and at the same time, deciding who you're not. And very often, in order to really discover who we are, it actually is a negative experience, or it's a set of negative experiences. It's more experiences of things not working, of not being very good at something, not being comfortable somewhere, because through all these negative experiences, we start to get an idea of where we feel comfortable. So in fact, negative experiences can be a positive. And with Venus now moving into Leo, very self-centered sign in a way, you perhaps feel that actually you know what you want and you have a sense of your own power, but you also have a sense of where you are not powerful. All of us have places where we are not powerful, and you have places where you're not powerful, and you know where they are. And so with Venus moving into Leo, you get a great sense of where you should be. And this might relate to your ambitions from a recent past. You've had ambitions. You've got things you want to do. You've got things you thought were important. But now, with Venus moving into Leo, you can look at them again and say, well, was it important? And you might reach the conclusion that some of your recent ambitions weren't actually taking you anywhere. They were actually someone else's ambitions, and you were living out someone else's ambitions, and that was just completely unreal and insincere. But it's okay. Things are changing. You now have a great sense of who you are and where you want to be, and also, I think, how you are going to fit in with a changing world. And I think today, Libra, you are very aware of how the world is changing. You can see it. And you're also very aware of how changes in the world are going to affect you. They could impact your lifestyle. They could impact you in an economic sense, as well as a sort of a spiritual sense, in terms of your own happiness, perhaps. But because right now you can actually see your connections with the world out there and how the world's destiny fits in with your destiny, you're able to make changes. These are not changes that have to be thought about a lot or really analysed. They're actually going to be quite natural and intuitive, because you are more intuitive now. You are becoming intuitive. It's not about spending ages and ages trying to think things through or listening to your feelings. It's just about knowing. So over the next day, think about that. You just know, don't you? Really. Now, of course, just because you know something doesn't mean to say that you're able to act on that knowledge, because, if you're a Libran, you might think that you've got to consider other people's opinions and you don't want to rock the boat and all of that. But, Venus is in Leo. It is a time now to be thinking about yourself and thinking about what you want to achieve. Again, what you want to achieve, not what someone else wants you to achieve. And this is all going to start to crystallize over the course of the day, and I think it's going to crystallize even more as you move into tomorrow, as the moon moves out of Virgo, moves into Libra, which is your star sign. It might be your star sign, it might be your ascendant sign, might be your moon sign. Depends how you're looking at these 12 sign readings. But as the moon moves into Libra, that's over the next day, it's going to make you feel even more comfortable and even more certain that you're moving in the right direction, or at least you'll know what that direction is. You'll know what that right direction is. And I suppose you could choose not to follow that direction, but Libra, I think you know what's best for yourself. Scorpio. Venus is moving into Leo. And I think that from a Scorpio view, that could be quite an important event. And that is because from a Scorpio view, Leo is quite a high-profile sign. And Scorpio, you feel that Leo is how you project yourself. And so with Venus moving into Leo, you perhaps feel that it is a time when you really do need to project yourself, when you need to tell the world who you are and what you want. And at the same time, Scorpio, you may be a little vainer than usual. I know that vanity is not great. Is vanity one of the seven sins? Yeah, but I mean, I suppose we're all vain to an extent, aren't we? So I'm not making this as a criticism, but with Venus in Leo, you just could become a little vainer than usual. You could be considering how what kind of impression you're having. Okay, maybe vain is the wrong word, but Venus moving into Leo could be it's like looking in a mirror. What you look like in a mirror is perhaps going to be more important than usual, and you're going to perhaps feel that it's going to be very important that you express yourself in the right way, that you come over in the right way, and things like what you wear and everything else is going to be important to you, and something that you might be putting more emphasis than usual on. And I must emphasize, I'm not making this as just a criticism, it's just saying it the way it is. And it may indeed be important, because with Venus moving into Leo, for many Scorpios, your ambitions are going to be important. Mercury is already in Leo, so Venus is also moving into Leo. So with Venus moving into Leo, you need to do whatever it takes to achieve your ambitions. And I suppose if one's trying to achieve ambitions and one wants things, then one's got to do whatever it takes to get a favourable response. And I suppose appearance could be quite important. And at the same time, the moon is making a trine to Mars. Mars is your ruler. So that trine involving the moon and Mars is, I think, going to give you a boost. It's going to allow you to, I think, express yourself in quite a powerful way, and in a way which may be a little bit disruptive. Because, Mars and Uranus are moving towards a conjunction, and that conjunction between Mars and Uranus is disruptive. It's quite destabilizing. And I know it's easy to see that Mars-Uranus conjunction in a negative sense. You might be concerned about what happens when that Mars-Uranus conjunction becomes exact next week. But there may be benefits to that Mars-Uranus conjunction. Mars and Uranus together might allow you to shake things up in your favour. And so the moon making a trine to Mars, trine to Uranus, may allow you, Scorpio, to engineer change. Maybe today. So it's something you don't like, or something that you think could be better, or you feel you want to have an influence, then your actions, maybe your actions which simply would come completely out of the blue, could be very significant. Maybe it's best that they do come out of the blue. You don't want to give people too much warning, because moon trine Mars, trine Uranus is about something of a surprise. So, Scorpio, that's perhaps something you should consider. I know that Scorpio is a fixed sign. It likes to do things in a fairly methodical way. But I suppose we shouldn't forget that Scorpio, it does have a sting. And I suppose when you get stung by a scorpion, you're not expecting it, are you? I mean, I've never been stung by a scorpion, but they just do it, don't it? It just suddenly happens. You're stung. And so maybe some people today are just suddenly going to get stung. You see the opportunity, and when you sting, you get their attention. And because you have the element of surprise, you're able to move things forward in your way, and perhaps to your advantage. Sagittarius. You are, I think, in quite a powerful position. you remain in a powerful position. Jupiter is still on the Sun-Pluto midpoint, and Jupiter's been aspecting the Sun-Pluto midpoint, for the last few days, and the Sun and Pluto do represent power, a great sense of oneself and what one wants to achieve, and also how you're going to be able to have a real impact on the world. You've got your personality, and you don't want your personality to be discounted. It has to be there. People have to take you seriously. And that may very well be part of a Sagittarian experience today. So, don't hold back. And also, at the moment, with the moon making a trine to Mars, I think that moon trine Mars is going to make you fairly ambitious. I think you're going to want things to be done your way, and you might have particular ideas about the way things should be organized, how people should get together, how people should spend their time, especially the case if you're in a position of authority. But even if you're not in a position of authority, questions of organization and power are going to be important to you, and you're going to want to make sure that everyone is doing things your way. And I know this sounds a little bit uncharacteristic for a Sagittarius. I mean, Sagittarius is supposed to be sort of a fairly freedom-loving sign. You don't really think about Sagittarius as having detailed schedules and roster and whatever. But today, I think you are going to want a certain amount of control, and I think you're going to want to impose that control, and you're going to perhaps want to impose a particular regime onto other people. Again, that doesn't sound typically Sagittarian, but I think it may be at the moment part of who you are and part of what you want. So don't be afraid, Sagittarius, of being a little bit of a control freak, provided your intentions are good and your intentions are also honest. But Sagittarius is an honest sign, isn't it? Another thing going on today is that we've got Venus moving into Leo. So that's Venus moving into a fire sign. And Sagittarius, that is something that is really very much to be welcomed. Venus has been in Cancer for some time, and Cancer and Sagittarius don't get on too well. I mean, I'm not saying that Cancerians and Sagittarians don't get on too well. I'm more saying that there's a lack of ease in terms of comparing the two signs, Sagittarius and Cancer. They're two very different signs. And so with Venus moving through Cancer, it just may have felt that you and other people just very often just weren't quite on the same wavelength. There's nothing that you could quite put your finger on, but it was still very real. And with Venus moving into Leo, then there's more comfort going on. Venus is a universal planet of relationships. And so Venus moving into Leo, there's greater scope for understanding people, understanding people's priorities, and they understanding your priorities. So you no longer have to spend ages trying to worry what someone is thinking, what someone's feeling, what plans they're keeping to themselves. It's a time when things are going to be more open and honest and upfront. And I do think, Sagittarius, that relationships are going to be a lot easier. So if there have been any recent misunderstandings, or you have felt that you haven't understood someone, then things are changing, and I think that you will very much benefit from Venus moving into Leo. And also Venus moving into Leo does play to your strengths. You are a fire sign. Now you've got Mercury and Venus in a fire sign, and that puts you in a stronger position. That means that it's easier for you to make decisions. It's easier for you to make up your mind. And Sagittarians make up their mind best when they do it quickly. It's not about endless analysis, endless heart searching. It's just about knowing. It's just about knowing the answer, what knowing the answer is, and knowing the answer to problems in general, and perhaps people in particular. People can be a puzzle, trying to work out whether someone can be trusted. But now it's obvious, I think. I think it's becoming obvious. In an instant, I think, in many cases, you will know whether someone can be trusted, whether you want someone to be part of your life. And by the same token, if you've had enough of someone, it will be clear, it will be obvious. Capricorn. The Sun is making a trine to Saturn. I mean, that's really the main aspect happening today. And Sun trine Saturn is a pretty fortunate aspect, particularly if you're a Capricorn. I mean, Saturn is your ruler, the Sun is trine Saturn, so you just feel a sense of comfort and ease, that you understand how things are going, and it's just easy for you to be in control and for you to assert yourself. You don't have to fight, you don't have to argue. People will just accept you as you are, and if you say something, especially if it's reasonable, then they're going to just say, fine, Capricorn is being reasonable, we'll do what Capricorn says. So Capricorns are, I think, in a pretty strong position here. And people are going to take you seriously. So that does mean that relationships should work pretty well today. And so you don't have to feel that you're alone or you need to be alone. Perhaps in the recent past, you felt that, you and other people weren't maybe always on the same wavelength. But now things click. And I think Capricorn, it's the seriousness as well that really matters. Your opinions and your advice, Capricorn, they do count for a great deal. And so if you've got something to say, say it. You don't have to be angry about it. Just say it calmly, and people will listen and they will accept your word for it. At the same time, the moon is making a trine to Mars and a trine to Uranus. That may indicate a bit of excitement, and you may become aware that you've been doing something right for a long time, but you haven't been doing it 100% right. And you now can see that a little bit of fine-tuning is required. Not a great deal of fine-tuning, but it's just that you needed to know something else, and the information just simply wasn't available. But now it has become available. So do take advantage of that. And in the process, allow other people to be inventive. There are some clever, inventive people around at the moment. And they've got some great ideas, and they may not be your kind of people. At least on the surface they might not be, but if you listen to what they're saying and you're prepared to learn from them. I mean, I know that today in general is a time when Capricorns are the ones in control, but you still got to give other people some room. Some people have got something useful to say, something important to say, that could have a bearing on what you're trying to achieve. So, sure, you can be a teacher today, but you can also be a pupil. There's just a couple of things that, you just don't have all the information you need, and I think that someone is able to provide it. And in terms of relationships, I think it looks like being a good day. The Sun trine Saturn, which I've already talked about, suggests it's going to be a good day. And you have to get the balance right, though. It's not about you being in full control. It's about you perhaps being in, 70% control. Because of that moon trine Mars that I was talking about. The moon trine Mars does represent another person's dynamism. And it does seem, Capricorn, that you can benefit in many ways from another person. Perhaps doing something that was a little bit unexpected, but also doing something that was original and perhaps also educational. You see someone doing something you weren't expecting, and in the process, you learn something. Aquarius. So, when I was talking to Capricorn just now, I mentioned the fact that there is a trine between the Sun and Saturn. Now, that trine between the Sun and Saturn is important to you, as well as Capricorn. Well, you share a ruling planet with Capricorn. Saturn is your ruler. And the Sun is trine Saturn. And the Sun is ruler of Leo, which is Aquarius's opposite sign. So with Sun trine Saturn for an Aquarius, I think that does bode well for relationships. So do consider your various relationships, how you link with other people, how you've linked with other people in the past, because right now you and someone else can find a natural rapport. And this Sun trine Saturn is in water signs. Sun is in Cancer, Saturn is in Pisces. So it's like you and someone else, you just have a natural oneness. You're on the same wavelength. You don't have to really talk about it. It could actually be, it could be quite emotional. And I understand that Aquarius is not a particularly emotional sign. It's an air sign, but still, at the moment, the emotional side of things does matter. And if you want to get on with someone, perhaps you've maybe fallen out with someone recently, or perhaps it's someone new you're trying to bring into your life. It's not that you have to say anything. It's just that you have to just perhaps be with that person and try to understand at an emotional level what that person is all about, and in the same way they may have a chance to understand what you're like, what kind of person you really are. So I think relationships can be really stabilized and enhanced, and I think relationships at all levels, I'm not just talking about romance, who are all the people you have to deal with, people you regard as being important in your life. Now is a great time to create a sense of unity and oneness and be part of a successful and vibrant network. So that, I think, is good news. But it's not particularly dramatic, but it is something that is a benefit. And continuing on the theme of relationships, we have Venus moving into Leo. So Venus is a planet of relationships. Venus is moving into Leo, which is your opposite sign. You've already got Mercury already in Leo. Venus is now moving into Leo. And so with two personal planets moving into Leo, that does indicate that in general you should be thinking about the other, about what other people have to offer. And also with Venus moving into Leo, you have to be aware of other people's weaknesses. In particular, you have to accept that some people just need recognition. And giving people recognition is just not something that's always natural to an Aquarius. You just don't think it's necessary. So if you want someone to be happy and to stay happy, every now and then you have to give someone a little bit of evidence that they exist, that their efforts amount to something. And that might be about just praising someone, telling someone, okay, not necessarily how wonderful they are, but just the occasional compliment can go a long way with Venus in Leo, because Venus in Leo, it's quite proud, and it likes attention, and it likes acknowledgement. And if you can give someone a little bit of attention, a little bit of acknowledgement, a little bit of praise, it would just make all the difference. And I think that having the right set of relationships, Aquarius, is important to you, and just a few nice words can help move you forward to this sort of interpersonal ambition. Yeah, it is interpersonal ambition, and I know you may not feel it's important, but it is important to have the right relationships, and a bit of care and attention on your part can make all the difference. Pisces. The moon is still in Virgo. Virgo is your opposite sign, so it's a situation where I think relationships do continue to be important. You can't ignore other people. Now, if you are in Australia or New Zealand or East Asia, then you might feel the impact of an opposition between the moon and Saturn, across the main axis of your chart. And that could create a few problems in relationships where you just feel that you and someone else just don't have anything in common. And it's just easy to jump to conclusions. You might just say, well, this is it. We have nothing in common. We've got nothing to say to each other. And maybe you take the view that someone is not worth bothering with. And you may think that they think that you are somehow restricting them, that you are not allowing someone to move. I don't know whether that impression is right, but there may be a few issues there, as I said, especially if you're in Australia and New Zealand and East Asia. But Moon opposition Saturn it's a short-term aspect. It's not going to last long, and as the day progresses, as you move into tomorrow, I think the situation will improve. Now, if you're in the Americas and Europe, I don't think that Moon opposition Saturn is such a big deal. I think that you can concentrate more on an aspect between the Moon and Mars, and Moon aspecting Mars, Moon trine Uranus, and this may be about someone having an influence on you, someone shaking things up. Perhaps you need things to be shaken up a little. You've got Saturn in Pisces. You like things to be done perhaps in the same way, same old way, but a bit of a surprise, something happening that you weren't expecting, can be just what you need to move things on to the next level. And I don't think that it's really any threat, because another aspect happening is we've got Sun trine Saturn. So Saturn is in Pisces, and the Sun is trine Saturn, and that fundamentally puts you in, I think, a very strong position. It just gives you an ability to stabilize things. And what is it stabilizing? It's basically stabilizing your creative impulse. Really being able to be creative at any stage. And it's very important, Pisces, for you to realize that creativity doesn't have a time limit. Some people might think that you can't be successful, for example, in a creative sense beyond a certain age. That if you haven't been creative in a particular department, I don't know, by the time you're 20, then that department is closed for you. Or you take the view that you can't start new types of creativity after a certain age because you're too old to learn or something like that. But this is clearly not the case. And I think that Sun trine Saturn is about perhaps being able to do something of greater significance, regardless of your age. You're never too old to learn. I think that is part of what Sun trine Saturn is about. So don't stop yourself just because you think something might be too late. It is not too late, and I think that is the message of Sun trine Saturn. And all that's required is effort, and plus, not just effort, but also the emotional understanding of what is possible. Listen to your feelings. If you have a feeling that you are supposed to be doing something, that it's important, that it matters, and it needs to be done right now, then I would listen to that feeling. And with that Saturn trine Sun, you can fix that feeling, you can stabilize it, you can articulate it, and once you've articulated it, then you can put ideas and even fantasy into action. You can make them real, and I think that you can really benefit enormously from that aspect between the Sun and Saturn. And that's it for the 12 signs. And I'm now going to look at today from the view of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 63, after completion. So this hexagram, 63, represents a situation where something has happened. We have crossed the great water. We've crossed the river. We've got to the other bank. So in that sense, there may be a certain sense of achievement. We have changed things. We've moved from one place to another, and that may be a source of great satisfaction and relief. I mean, crossing the river, that was a dangerous venture, but we accomplished it. But having moved from one place to another, we have, at least in a short term, we have weakened ourselves, because having moved to this new place, whatever it is in your life, it doesn't mean you've literally moved to another place or you've literally crossed the river, but having moved from one space to another space, you perhaps don't know all the rules. You feel a little bit insecure, and you're still trying to work things out. And we do have a moving line here. The second line from the bottom on this hexagram moves. And the image here is of a woman in her carriage. And this carriage has a protective screen. I suppose it's there to protect her from prying eyes. And with this second hexagram from the bottom, it says the screen has been lost. And so there is this incredible sense of vulnerability. That, what do we do? This protection that we used to have before we made the transition, before we crossed the Great River, has been lost. So new situation means that we're feeling very vulnerable. And so the question is, what do we do? So the advice I Ching gives is, don't panic. If we wait, we will get the screen back. We will get that protection back. So if you have made a recent transition in whatever, whatever you're doing, whatever matters to you, if you've made that transition may have made you temporarily vulnerable because you don't know the rules, because you're not familiar with this new situation. It's a new place, and if you just act as if nothing had changed, yeah, sure, you would be making yourself vulnerable. And the advice here is to just stop what you're doing. You've had this exhausting transition across the river. You've reached the bank, and now you just have to wait and not do anything dramatic. You have to familiarize yourself with the situation. And then, in the end, you will get the screen back. The woman will get her screen back. She'll be able to put it back in place in her carriage, and she will be protected. Likewise, you will get your protection back. And this protection may be something that you feel that you've lost. It may not be about a screen, but there was something you were relying on for protection. You thought you were safe because something was protecting you. And right now you just may feel that you've lost an important protection that you used to have. And that may be making you nervous. And the I Ching is telling you not to worry, that you will get that protection back. So don't panic about it. And we've got this second line moving, and it's kind of not surprising which hexagram we move to after 63, after completion. We move to hexagram 56, the Wanderer, and this is just reminding us about what has really happened. We've moved to a new place, new rules, new situation, and so we've lost touch with firm ground. We are a wanderer. We don't live in this place. We don't live in this place yet. We are a stranger because we've made this change. And that means we have to behave with incredible caution because we don't know the rules. And we mustn't take things for granted, and we need to show great humility. And being a wanderer, this means being involved in something we don't fully understand. Being a wanderer could be anything. I mean, it might be, I don't know, just buying a new computer and not knowing how it works. And you're a wanderer in one sense because you don't know how it works. Or buying some new piece of technology, you don't know how it works. Get a new cell phone. I mean, cell phones are not easy to work as far as I'm concerned. You get a cell phone, you're a wanderer. So it depends. You can be a wanderer in anything. And so when you're a wanderer, you just need to have some humility and understand you don't know the rules, and also be prepared to get some help and to appreciate the help when it comes, and not to take it for granted. So, overall with these two hexagrams, it's just a situation where it seems that we have made a change, and as a result of this change, we're not feeling 100% comfortable with it, simply because we're still getting up to speed and we're still getting used to the rules, and we're just worried we don't have the protection we used to have. But I think the indication here is that the situation will resolve itself, and I think the key is just getting used to it and taking advantage of any help that is available. And now I want to consider what it means for Venus to be in Leo. So today Venus moves into Leo. Okay, it may be tomorrow, depends where you are. But what does it mean for Venus to be in Leo if you happen to have Venus in Leo in your chart? Well, Venus is supposedly the planet of relationships at a very simple level. I mean, that's one way of looking at it. So it may say something about relationships and how we relate, but I think in terms of Venus and relationships, I think that you very much have to consider, what planets Venus is aspecting, what house it's in. So it's very difficult to just look at Venus in Leo and just abstract it in terms of relationships. But I suppose you could say that anyone with Venus in Leo is going to potentially have a relatively high need for praise and attention. I mean, all things being equal, because Leo's quite into getting attention. I mean, that's part of the Leo experience. And Venus in Leo is not in Cancer. I mean, I know that's obvious, but we shouldn't forget that Venus in Leo is a relatively unemotional place for Venus, all things being equal. It's not about flow. I mean, Venus is not in detriment in Leo. It's not fallen in Leo. But I'm wondering if Venus is always very comfortable in Leo, because Venus is a feminine planet. It's quite a negative planet, and so Leo may just be a bit too much for Venus, and so Venus may just feel a bit burnt out in Leo, even if it's not combust. But I do think that there is a sense of self which is going to be very important for Venus in Leo, and of course it will depend to an extent whether it's a male chart or a female chart. So in a female chart, Venus is much more personal. It's much more who you are. It's not likely to be projected. So in a female chart, you could argue that Venus is, in many respects, your planet. It's like the moon. It's something that perhaps describes who you are. So if you've got Venus in Leo, even if you haven't got the sun in Leo, you may have Leo qualities. You might put a great premium on yourself and what you can do. And remember, Venus is in a fire sign, and it might just give you sort of a natural intuitive understanding of the way things are. And so that's one aspect of Venus in Leo. Whereas if a man has Venus in Leo, it could be projected. Venus in Leo may be what he perhaps expects from the opposite sex, for example. May describe his partner or his wife. I think there is a sort of a rule you could take, is that if If a man is born at night, then his partner is going to be more described by the moon, and that means if he's born after sunset, between sunset and sunrise, then the moon will describe his partner. If he's born in the hours of day, then Venus will be more descriptive of his partner. I'm not saying for sure that is absolutely true, but I think it's perhaps worth playing with if you're looking at lots of different charts. I think the same kind of works with a female chart. So in a female chart, a woman born at night it's Mars is going to more describe her partner. If she's born by day, then the sun is going to be more descriptive. Again, it's something to play with, and perhaps so in a female chart, you need to look at both the sun and Mars together. But do consider day and night. I think that does matter. But those are a few general theoretical views about Venus in Leo. It's very difficult to look at Venus in Leo, well, as with any planet, but just to look at Venus in Leo in isolation. It might be about pride. It might be. I suppose one should remember, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but in astrology, Leo is seen to be it's often described as a barren sign. Barren as in not being fertile. And so Venus in Leo could be barren. And obviously, I don't think this really applies so much to natal charts, but in horary charts, when someone is asking a question and you've got childbirth issues, pregnancy issues, which really I don't think that pregnancy, childbirth questions are always some of the worst to have to deal with from a horary perspective, particularly if there have been recent problems. But so if you have a chart question relating to childbirth and you see Venus in Leo, remember, I'm not talking really so much about natal charts, but more about horary charts when you're setting up the chart for when a question is asked. When you see Venus in Leo, that is not, all things being equal, not a good sign of pregnancy or fertility, because Leo is a barren sign. I'm taking the view of William Lilly in Christian astrology, and there are some pregnancy charts in Christian astrology, and his treatment of them is actually quite brutal. Lilly was quite brutal in the way he told people the truth. So Venus in Leo can be an issue there. So just bear that in mind. Venus in Leo sounds good, but in a horary chart, it is in a barren sign. So take that how you want to take it. So that's Venus in Leo from a theoretical perspective. So let's now just look at some charts of people with Venus in Leo. Remember, as always, these are charts that I'm interested in. This is not a good representation of the broad population of people with Venus in Leo. So let's start with the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. I talked about her recently because she's a potential presidential candidate, isn't she? If Biden were to drop out, she's sort of highly regarded by Democrats, and she has Venus in Leo. Furthermore, she has got Venus conjunct Regulus in Leo. Look at her Venus. It's at 29 degrees 15 Leo. So this is perhaps a reminder, but it's not just about looking at where Venus, what sign Venus is in, but what part of the sign is in. So I suppose if you've got presidential ambitions, having Venus conjunct Regulus would be great, wouldn't it? Regulus is the royal star. It's about connections. It's about going to the top. I mean, she's already governor of Michigan. I mean, that's pretty good. It's pretty difficult to become governor of Michigan. I understand that she was born to a very political family, so she certainly had a lot of advantages. But still, she's got to be governor of Michigan with Venus in Leo. She's a woman. This Venus is not projected. I would guess that she had a high opinion of herself. Will she be president? I don't know. Venus is conjunct the South Node, though. I don't think short term. I mean, I've already looked at her chart. I didn't think this was the right time for her, by the way. But she does have Venus in the same sign as the South Node, so there's always a chance that she comes a cropper there with that South Node. I mean, I'll have to look at this chart perhaps in more detail. But I think the main point is she's got Venus in Leo. A real sense of herself. She's already governor of Michigan, and Venus is conjunct conjunct Regulus. Someone else who I think has Venus conjunct Regulus is Monica Lewinsky. So we know about Monica Lewinsky. So Monica Lewinsky was, of course, this intern, Bill Clinton's intern, who he had sexual contact with. You can, if you're interested in the details, you can look it up on the internet. And of course, she nearly brought Clinton's presidency to a halt. She nearly, but he managed to get through it. And she has Venus conjunct Regulus. Now, I don't know a great deal about Monica Lewinsky, but clearly she was, I think, treated quite unfairly, by the way. I think that, she confided in someone about her relationship with Bill Clinton and what had happened between her and Bill Clinton, and that confidence was betrayed, and so and as a result, I think she's got into all of these problems. So in a way, one does feel very sorry for her that this has completely had such a dramatic impact on her life. But she has Venus conjunct, having Venus on Regulus. That's her getting involved with people at the absolute highest level, the President of the United States, you could say. And Venus, Regulus can be a bit of a shooting star. It sort of reaches the top, and then it sort of gets undermined very quickly. And of course, she was put under a lot of pressure, and so that's her Venus in Regulus, Venus conjunct Regulus. I mean, you could say that chart looks good. I mean, I don't see any immediate problem with her Venus conjunct Regulus, but I suppose you also have to notice that she's got Mars on the 7th house cusp. I mean, maybe that's all the aggravation that came with it. But that Venus in Regulus is just very simple, having close contact with the President of the United States. That is one way of looking at it. Another woman with Venus conjunct Venus in Leo is Marine Le Pen. I don't want to spend very long on her chart, but if you take the view that Regulus has an orb of 5 degrees, I think that orb is way too high. I think an orb of 1 degree, 2 degrees is more reasonable. But you could say that Marine Le Pen's Venus in Leo is close to Regulus, and it does give her a certain amount of prominence. I mean, she's already vying to be president of France at some stage, even despite her setbacks in legislative elections. Though we are reminded that Venus in Leo is not the best. It's not the best sign for Venus. It's Venus would work best, in terms of its natural place when it is above the horizon in a nighttime chart, and in a feminine sign. So Leo is, of course, a masculine sign. So there's always a bit of a problem, perhaps, with Venus in Leo. And I think that with Venus in Leo, she's, here is someone who's always trying to be successful politically. And I do, as I've already discussed, I think there is something tragic about that chart. But still, her Venus is close to Regulus, and she's getting very close to becoming president of France. Maybe 2027. That's the next presidential elections. Maybe maybe she'll make it next time. I need to look at it. I mean, I haven't really looked at it in detail, but I do know that the presidential elections in 2027, she's got a Saturn return. Someone else with Venus in Leo, this time a man with Venus in Leo, is one of the candidates to be Trump's vice president. So J.D. Vance is highly regarded in many quarters, and I don't know his time of birth. So he has got Venus in Leo. So I suppose if you've got Venus in Leo, you'd expect him to have a fairly high opinion of himself. His Venus in Leo is very close to Trump's ascendant. So, relatively close. Trump has got an ascendant of 29 Leo. He's got Mars at 26 Leo. So perhaps the advantage of having J.D. Vance as vice president, I mean, there are other disadvantages, but that Venus may work well with Trump's Mars, may kind of help soften some of Trump's rough edges, perhaps. But J.D. Vance is, so he is popular. He is certainly amongst the right, and he does come over very well as he comes, and so he's able to present himself well. So then maybe how Venus in Leo is working, but we do have this problem that we don't have his time of birth. Someone whose time of birth we do have is George Bush Jr. So George Bush Jr. had Venus in Leo in the first house. And you could say, certainly if you're using whole signs, that George Bush Jr., his Placidus, his midheaven is in Aries. But if you take whole signs, Venus has Taurus covers the 10th house. So you could say he's got the ruler of the 10th house in the first house. So Venus in Leo in the first house, potentially as ruler of the 10th house, could have really helped him project himself in terms of getting people to like him. We've already talked about the fact he's got Mercury in Leo rising, but he also has Venus in Leo rising. So perhaps during the presidential debates in 2000, he was able to come over in a way that the American people could relate to, perhaps better from Al Gore. So I think that for him, that Venus in Leo did seem to be working quite well. One also assumes that he had a certain pride and perhaps was somewhat unforgiving of people who crossed him. Maybe that's Venus in Leo. I wouldn't have thought that Venus in Leo is particularly forgiving. I mean, it's a fixed sign. It doesn't like to be criticized. That would certainly be how Venus in Leo might actually work. Another politician is Robert Fico, who was recently has just survived an assassination attempt, and he doesn't strike me as being a particularly charismatic politician. That was not my impression. I mean, not that I speak Slovak, but when I was in Slovakia, he seemed to be someone who just understood the way the system worked. And I think he'd been a member of the Communist Party when he was before the collapse of the Soviet Union. He just got the system, and he worked it through in that sort of Virgo way. Yet he has Venus in Leo, and one has to explain perhaps how he has been able to perhaps be so successful, and maybe that Venus in Leo did help him. He's got a Venus-Mars conjunction in Leo, so Venus-Mars, I know it's quite a wide conjunction, but Venus-Mars can be quite charismatic. It's not a charisma that I was particularly aware of, but Mars can also be dangerous. If you've got Venus conjunct Mars, Mars could be the assassin potentially. So that's one way in which Mars could be working. And also, it's a reminder that with Mars conjunct Venus, there are people that really can't stand him, which there certainly are. And Venus in Leo, someone who doesn't like being crossed, and that's now when he became prime minister, he's going to, and now he's because he was forced to leave office, now he's back, and of course he's going back to the old regime. I think having control over the media, I think that's quite important. I mean, he's not a great Democrat. He likes to be in control. I mean, like a lot of people like to be in control once they become prime minister. It happens everywhere, but that's his Venus in Leo. Now, Venus in Leo could, under certain circumstances, be unpleasant and dangerous and egotistical to the point of being murderous. And Joran van der Sloot, I don't have a time of birth for him, has Venus in Leo. So Joran van der Sloot was, I think he's a sort of a double murderer. He lived on this Dutch island in the Caribbean, and there was this American tourist, Natalie Holloway, and he murdered her. I'm not quite sure why. Maybe she rejected in advance or something. And he was as an obsessive gambler. I mean, I don't think he's stupid, but apparently he gambled a lot, and he came from a relatively good background. And then he went to Peru, and he killed someone else. He killed another woman in Peru, and so he's gone to prison. He's now in prison in Peru, and I think he might have had a relationship as well. He's got a child with another woman in Peru. I mean, clearly, some women seem to find him attractive at some level, but he's clearly Venus in Leo. This is an example of someone who has a high opinion of himself, and that is one aspect of Venus in Leo. And he's got Sun conjunct Venus, and so if he's actually got Sun, Venus, Mars in Leo. So you could just say his Venus in Leo is just adding to the fact that he has a high opinion of himself, and that's just the way it is. And Sun conjunct Venus, one of the problems of Sun conjunct Venus can, in a male chart, Sun conjunct Venus can be about someone who treats women badly. Now, normally that's not about murdering them, it's just abusing them, discounting them, not paying them the compliments they want. But in his case, Sun conjunct Venus, perhaps because Mars is involved and also Pluto is involved. So you've got to look at the overall chart. And with Joran van der Sloot, it's not just the fact that he has got Sun conjunct Venus, he's got Venus square Pluto. So Venus square Pluto, or this is Venus Pluto at its absolute worst. you think of Pluto and with Persephone, the Persephone myth, Persephone disappearing, having to disappear for 6 months. Because she ate the 6 pomegranate seeds. Well, in the case of Natalie Holloway, she was murdered and disappeared, and we know. I don't think we ever knew what happened to her body, and it took a long time for him to actually admit that he had killed her. But that's Joran van der Sloot. Another person with a problematic past with Venus in Leo is William Calley. So William Calley was the American officer who was in charge at the time of the My Lai massacre in Vietnam, in South Vietnam, where this village of My Lai with just these American soldiers massacred the inhabitants for no particular reason, and William Calley was in charge, and so you could say that he was responsible. So he has Venus in Leo. We don't know exactly what happened and what the cause of that massacre was, but perhaps there's a certain sense of him being really into himself, and there's a sense of ego, and perhaps there's a certain sense of being disrespected, maybe, by when he was in My Lai, when he was trying to interact with these with the villagers in My Lai, and with his Venus conjunct Pluto, and that's how Venus responded to the situation. And I don't have a time of birth, but that just shows that Venus wasn't really working very well, was it? So I'm running out of time. Someone who had Venus conjunct Leo Venus in Leo was a man called Rick Husband. Now, Rick Husband was the commander of the Columbia space shuttle, and there's his chart. And Rick Husband had a Venus-Mars conjunction. And so remember what happened to the Columbia space shuttle. It burnt up on re-entry. And I somehow think this sort of fits. I mean, there's his Venus. Venus at 13 Leo. I mean, I suppose you could say here is the commander of the space shuttle. Got Venus and Mars in Leo, responsible position, but it's it's close to the conjunction of Mars. Now that might make him charismatic and attractive. I suppose you have to be like that if you want to be commander of a space shuttle. But then you compare his Venus in Leo with the actual time of the Columbia disaster. So this was the Columbia disaster. So let's just put the two charts side by side. So there's Rick Husband, there's the Columbia disaster. So at the time of the Columbia disaster, there was just after a new moon at 12 at about 12 Aquarius. This new moon was opposition Jupiter. Jupiter was at 13 Leo. And this new moon opposition Jupiter was exactly hitting his Mars. And this new moon opposition Jupiter was also hitting his Venus. So you could say that in his case, Venus in Leo may actually have been his life force. And it was afflicted at the time of his birth by being close to Mars, and then that new moon opposition Jupiter on his Venus, on his Mars, was what led to him being dying in the space shuttle. And I think there's one more person I do want to talk about, because I have not talked about her before. and that is a new president of Mexico. People have asked about her, but I haven't covered her. I don't really know anything about her, but obviously she's a woman, and she has become president of Mexico. I don't have a time of birth for her, so this is Claudia Sheinbaum, and so she was born June the 24th, 1962, and she has Venus in Leo. There you can see Venus is in Leo, and when you look at Venus, you should ask yourself, to what extent does Venus actually have any dignity? I haven't really looked at the dignity in terms of her chart. And in this case, using the Egyptian terms, Venus does have terms, because Venus rules the terms from, I think, 6 degrees Leo through to 11 degrees Leo. So Venus is not peregrine. Venus does have dignity here. And Venus is conjunct the North Node. So I think a planet conjunct the North Node certainly benefits. It is certainly improved. The North Node is of the nature of Jupiter. Now, she does have Venus opposition Saturn. And it's quite a strong Saturn in Aquarius. She was born a month. She's a month younger than me, June the 24th, 1962, less than a month younger than me. And me not being president of Mexico, I suppose I feel a failure. But I suppose it must be quite a high-risk job being president of Mexico. And there is her Saturn opposition Venus. So what does that Saturn opposition Venus mean? And that Venus links into her Saturn and into her Neptune. I suppose Venus opposition Saturn in Aquarius, I suppose you could represents hard work, but still, it's a bit worrying having Venus opposition Saturn square Neptune. It could be that with her Venus, remember, she's a woman, so obviously it's her planet. She's not projecting it, and so perhaps she's able to link with everything that's wrong with her society as she sees it, everything that she's worried about in her society in her society as she sees it, with that Saturn square Neptune. So perhaps she's able to, really bring it to bear. But still, as president of Mexico, having Venus opposition Saturn square Neptune, it's going to be a tough job. Though it's perhaps fortunate that the Uranus is now moved in late fixed sign, so at least Uranus is not going to be aspecting her Venus Saturn opposition and aspecting Neptune. So that's something. But still, I would have said it is a bit of a worry, that Venus opposition Saturn. But when you're dealing with politicians, Saturn is often a very important planet, and so if you're going into politics, having Saturn opposition Venus may actually help. Maybe for ordinary people, Venus opposition Saturn might seem tough, but perhaps if you're a politician, it's not so bad. But we do need to have her time of birth, because I don't have her time of birth. So those are a few charts which have got Venus in Leo in them. I didn't feel I covered that as well as I should have done. But it's just a reminder that Venus in Leo is so dependent on the rest of the chart. And I don't think that one can just sort of look at Venus in Leo in isolation and just give an adequate account of it. But still, I do hope that you found that video of some use. And if you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.